Wonderful. I think you will enjoy today. Today we have Chan with us. Am I saying that correctly?
That's right, John. Thank you. Yep.
Awesome. And so we're going to see some of his artwork, and then he's going to show his process. Is that a real wall behind you, or is that an image?
It is real.
Yes,
It's real.
I love brick walls. They're so warm and so beautiful. Okay, so
Thank
with
you.
that, why don't we look at some of your work?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
sure.
do
Learn more about you.
I'll do a share screen first, John, to introduce
Sure.
our friends to socials, and then we'll have some of your artworks too. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody, please welcome John, who is based in Canberra, Australia. And in case you have not followed John, he's very much active on Instagram. That's his handle. And of course, he's also on Facebook. And he's got a beautiful website. That's chandisan.com. You will find out more about his workshops there. And this will be the couple of slides shown with your sample artworks, beginning with the gouache. We'll be happy to hear a line or two about each of the pieces here.
Yeah, so thanks, Ethel. These are very quick studies. So most of my gouache studies are very small and they're plein air. I will limit to about 20 minutes most. So trying to quickly capture the essence of the subject, just the relationship between the dark family and the light family. So I have access to, rivers and lakes around Canberra. So this is just in my own backyard, about 20 minutes from where I live. Yeah, so this is a river scene that's just done very quickly with gouache. And another scene, again, from a lookout. So what you see in that middle area is actually the Canberra. So this is looking into Canberra from a mountain that we have. And again, just trying to be very gestural, and I like the painterly quality with gouache. I use it like an oil sort of medium, very thick, very opaque sort of brush marks, but again, very quick gestural sort of study, but it's got enough to create something more substantial later on. Yeah, so we have some lovely architectural buildings, so I don't limit, gouache to a certain subject. Sometimes they're more architectural. This is this clock tower, and to sort of show that the size of it, I added a small people on the bottom to give a bit of scale to the clock tower. And again, this is done very quickly. I use canvas pads, so these are just pads of A4 size. I'll show you the sizes in a little bit later, but yeah, this is another gouache painting. Yeah, another quick study that I've done on location, trying to capture the depth in the painting. You can see the deeper shadows have more blue. I really love the Daniel Smith ultramarine blue, which I use quite a lot. I've got a very limited palette, but that ultramarine blue is my primary kind of blue. It's great for the shadows, plus also for the greeneries. I mix a bit of yellow, maybe like yellow ochre or cadmium yellow to create the greeneries. And as colors recede, they lose their chroma. And tonally things get lighter. So this is a sort of a very classical aerial perspective view.
And we'll
So
now move on
coming
to your
this,
watercolors.
yeah. So I've been painting in watercolor for over 20 years, and I like my watercolors to be fluid and dynamic. So I wet the paper, both sides, front and the back. And as the paper is drying, I will apply certain washes and limiting the darks to the very late. So you see the harder edges around that fallen log, that's put in much later, whereas on the peripheral outside, it's very blurry, which was painted first. It's just to draw your eye to the log and that sort of a tree that's in front of the log and keeping everything else blurred. And in a minute, I'll show you the actual subject that this was painted from, which will give you how much simplifying is necessary to, you know, create this. Yeah. Yeah, again, another river scene. This was done, you know, using the same technique like before, wetting both sides and just eliminating the unnecessary, you know, details, but just catching the essence of the early morning light and the reflection. So I basically, you know, change the chroma on the reflection more and push the background into the distance. Again, that's more of an artistic, you know, creative thing rather than what I actually saw. I would have seen much more details on the background, which would be distracting to the picture. So I have eliminated and placed the elements necessary to make it a more of an artwork.
That would be the last artwork here, Sean.
Yeah, sure. Um, if you like, I can share some of the plein air works that I do, and we can talk about the plein air works. I will share my screen.
Those were beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you see my screen?
Ooh,
Again.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, so again, a few more artworks. This is my little kit that I carry. These are just A4 size. And again, I said I would limit that to 30 minutes, the maximum, very quickly trying to capture something very, very quickly. You know, the subject is sometimes the subject doesn't need to be very pretty and you know, presented. You just create paintings with ordinary subjects. So this is the painting that you looked at, and that's where I actually painted it. And you can see I zoomed in on the subject and I created the cooler background to recede, whereas the picture had more warm colors. And I simplified the subject. This is a quick oil painting. So this is the same river. I like to do sort of smaller studies. Again, another oil painting. This is an ocean scene, and this is actually very close to the scene that I'm going to demonstrate in gouache today. You've already seen that one, and a few more plein air studies. So my probably about 60 to 70% of the work happens outdoor, and this is that scene that you saw, and that's what I saw. It's not very exciting, and hopefully the painting is more pleasing than sometimes what you're looking at because it's decluttered. I think in terms of the subjects, that's all I have. I do have some real pictures to show you in here. Ethel, if you like, I can switch my camera to that one and just show you some actual works as well.
Sure.
Yep. All right, I will stop sharing. And change my camera. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so these are that's the sort of the stuff that you saw before. Just to show you a few more. You know, these are plein air studies using gouache. I just try to use gouache to quickly capture something, you know, without laboring in detail, just catching the essence of the subject. And that's that one that you just saw. And the colors of gouache, I just find it very vibrant and rich. You know, they retain their vibrancy quite a lot, and that's that clock tower you saw. I'd like to show you a few oil paintings, which these are just little panels, and you know, they're done all plein air, and that's that one that you saw. And actually the one that I'm going to demonstrate is actually very similar scene to this, same similar subject. Another one this one is actually on a frame, but you can see the oil color. And what I would like to talk today is the differences and the likenesses of the three mediums: watercolor, gouache, and oils. Coming to, got a few watercolors. Maybe I'll just finish off by showing some of the watercolors as well. So this is a watercolor. So you can see the fluidity of the medium, and the transparency is watercolor strength. And this is the painting that you saw earlier, which is the real thing. But I do paint a variety of subjects. So this is a snow scene, which you know, leaving the white of the paper. Incidentally, when I'm painting watercolor, I use very little gouache, hardly any, but use a lot of water and leave the white of the paper. Just maybe one more or two more. And so sometimes just trying to capture the fluidity of the medium and leaving the white paper. There's not much gouache used here at all. It's mainly leaving off the white paper. And this is just the last demo last week for my online class, doing a snow scene. So what's left is there's no gouache at all used in this one. So just leaving these highlights. With the more I use watercolor, the more I leave the white paper without using gouache. I think if you overuse gouache in watercolor, I think you lose that feel. These little even highlights are just little tiny bits that are left as part of the initial wash. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much the sort of the works that I wanted to show. But what we'll do is get into a demonstration and go through the process. And what I will do is show you the actual image, reference image is this one. But before that, maybe I can just sort of share my screen again, Ethel.
Mm-hmm.
And just show you the reference image that I'm going to work. Let me share my screen again, sorry.
And Chan, when you're ready, could you just talk a little bit about your brushes as well? There's been some questions about what brushes you prefer. Thank you so much.
Yep, sure. Okay, let me share my screen. That way I can talk about the reference. I just want to talk a little bit about subject selection. I think that's an interesting topic that I get asked by a lot of questions, looking for the perfect subject. And my advice to you is the perfect subject is sitting in your own backyard. We don't have to go to the other side of the world to find it. I just show you a couple of examples just to sort of give you a bit of an idea. So this is the subject that I used. It has hardly any life, but it has the elements. And from that, I created this, right? And this is actually a color photograph of a bit of snow. It looks like hardly any color at all, but it is actually color. It didn't have it. But from that, I created this, all right? It had the elements and I eliminated the rest and introduced light, which this one didn't have. And again, this one didn't have any light, but it has the elements, the lights and the darks and the shapes. I borrowed that and created that. So to me, I'm not copying nature.
La telecamera. Questo è solo Gouache. No,
I'm not copying photographs. This is the actual subject that I used, but from that I created this, and you can see how dark it is, and there's lots more detail in this, and hopefully the painting is more interesting than the subject. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the subject is, we just need a shift in our mind and look at creatively at elements rather than trying to find picture postcard perfect subject, if that makes sense. So the demo that yes, sure.
This is Anna Marie, and I'm just blown away by your color work. You're taking experiences with plein air painting that you can't perceive the color through the camera, and you're just bringing it to life with color. Can you speak a little bit to your color theory in that you're speaking to the philosophy, which I love.
Yes.
Can you also speak into the color theory of the choices you're making with that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, you know, the color that didn't exist, but you know, from these, what I do is I know that cool colors recede. So if I cool the background, and I know as things recede, they become softer. So I'm using what I know from that plein air experience, and I know that warmer colors come forward. So I warm colors. When I say warm, it doesn't need to be red, but elements of red or elements of yellow, and then push the rest back into the distance. And also diminishing detail, you know, when you got a subject like this, details are in the foreground and texture is in the foreground, and more of the softer edges are in the background. That creates depth. Yeah, color can be creative. So this one actually has reflected light. I know when the sun hits the snow, it's going to reflect back onto the logs. And this one doesn't have that. But from that experience of seeing nature outdoor, I can apply those theories and just bend the rules a little bit and create color the way I like it and the way I perceive it rather than necessarily what I see it. And in here too, you know, I think it's simplifying the background and, you know, getting rid of a lot of these little tiny details and simplifying it to washes. And you can see so I let the medium paint about 30% of my work. And I think I said it in my excerpt. I said, I paint about 60%. I let the medium paint about 30%, and I leave 10% to the viewer to work out. And so, you know, even in here, you will see all the three primary colors. There's reds, there's yellows, and the blues, but in subtle forms. Yeah, so I mix colors on the paper so you can see the background. I don't just pre-mix colors on the palette. I apply glazes upon putting the warm colors first and putting the cool transparent colors over the warm colors, which are earthy colors, which are a little bit opaque. I hope that that answers the question. So Edel, I think we might go into the demo, and this is what I like to demonstrate, sort of a seascape. And when I look at something like this, it's very complicated. There's so many things. Is it about the rocks? Is it about the background? Is it about the middle ground? So this is where I actually do a little tonal sketch and a little color sketch just to see where I need to bring. So you can see I brought the background a little bit forward and eliminated and pushed the foreground forward, and it's just a little bit too prominent to make it more suitable as a subject. Just little adjustments goes a long way, rather than just copying, you know, what you see into, you know, too many details. And this is so what I like to do is to sort of demonstrate this from start to finish and show you the process. Is there any questions or? Anyone have any questions or anything?
When you paint outdoors, do you take a lot of different paints with you? Do you have a certain palette that you use outdoors? And do you leave your white when you mask, or when you leave your white?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I limit my palette to maximum of about 6 colors. So basically, it's about a warm and cool of each primary color, and it's about masking. When I'm painting watercolor, I don't use masking fluid. I just leave brush marks to control and leave the whites of the paper. The whites you leave on the paper is much whiter and brighter than the white that you use from paint. So limiting the sort of the materials to 6 colors. I can produce any color that I like, but also it harmonizes the painting. It brings into unity rather than disunity and disharmony. So that's pretty much the reason.
Do you base your color selection of 6 on the scenery that you know you're going to go paint?
Not based on the scenery. Basically, I just carry those 6 colors, and those 6 colors, I have found that I can probably mix any color that's out there in nature. One of the things you've got to realize is that nature is full of grays. So you got to neutralize color. And, using green, for example, is people use yellow and blue, but they forget to add red to knock off its chroma. Otherwise, it's too bright.
So, Chan, do I understand that when you paint with the gouache on canvas, do you use the white of the canvas like you do with watercolor? Or, I mean, I think we were looking at both watercolor paintings and gouache, so I may be mistaken, but do you use the canvas as your white?
So what I do is I leave the canvas, but I actually use gouache white paint to replace that. I don't generally leave the white of the paper for the gouache, but I do for watercolor.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I didn't want to draw this or have it prepared and color it in, because that's the other thing I want to talk about is the drawing. Now, drawings are very important. I carry a sketchbook and I draw almost every day, and these are just sketchbook I just carry, and just a daily practice of drawing. But I just find it's so necessary that you draw. Your drawing is going to be as good as your painting. Your painting is going to be as good as your drawing. But when it comes to here, this happens to people who draw well. If you draw a really elaborate drawing, what tends to happen is you're going to color in between lines, and you're going to end up with a very tightly controlled painting. So especially a painting like this, keeping it very loose, you want to eliminate that sort of tightness and that control. And I wanted to just start, I'm not going to sketch with pencil, I'm just going to go straight with brush onto this scene. And let me put the scene up so you can actually see it at the same time. If I can make this. You can see that. So you can see the reference image and everything together.
No, we can't.
You can't?
Can't.
Oh, you can. Okay. Let me see that better. Can you see that?
Now we can.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So in terms of the brushes, I think people ask me brushes. So I just use a couple of very simple square brushes. I probably end up using one brush for this whole demo. And for gouache, I use the square brushes, but for watercolor, I just use my mop brushes. These are the squirrel mop brushes, but I do use big brushes. The the small brushes are very naughty because they can just get into too many details. So when I get a big, smaller brush, I just, I'm very wary of it. In fact, I used to put red tape, yellow tape, and green tape on my brush. When I hold my brush at the very near the ferrule, I know it's danger. Yellow is warning, but when I'm in the green zone, it's free. So it's much looser, if that makes sense. So I think we're ready to go on to the demo. Ethel, is that okay?
Yeah,
Right.
please.
Okay. So let me just squeeze out a little bit of color. So this is my palette. Let me just talk about the palette. The colors I have obviously have white, and this is ultramarine blue, and Daniel Smith has generously sent me some gouache colors, which I was using. So thank you very much for that. So I'm using a few colors that that you've sent, which is Prussian blue, which is this one. And this is cerulean blue, and this is lavender, and this is magenta, and this is ochre pink, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, and cadmium red, and I think this is cobalt teal, this one, and this is burnt sienna. And I don't really use any red much. I think this is cadmium red, any medium, but I don't think I'll be using cadmium red for this demo anyway. All right, so let's have a look at this subject I'm just going to do. The other thing to note is I don't use much water for my gouache. So this is a canvas pad that I just put up. I just peel it off this this pad, just paper pads, and I just peel one and just stuck here. And I just find the texture, a little bit of texture on that takes the gouache onto from the brush. I just find that smooth paper doesn't work as well. I might even use a slightly bigger brush. Okay, so I'll probably end up using just one brush for the whole demo. So what I do is I get a bit of ultramarine blue, and first thing I do is I mark the center from horizontally and center vertically and put a dot. So I know where my center is, and I don't want to put something very significant like the horizon in the middle of the picture. So the next thing to decide is with this picture, I do want a higher horizon, probably somewhere here is okay, I think. That's okay. And then I look for the bigger masses. Now, I don't want to have a mountain ending on this edge. So if we've got a few mountains, I just want to simplify this more and just have something maybe somewhere here. There's one that's coming through somewhere here. And we have one that's coming through about here. And let's just sort of intersect this, and there's this little bit of rocks in the middle area, and this sort of comes down a bit further and about there. And then to match this horizontal, we have the diagonal of the rocks, which, so very roughly draw this without getting down on detail. So I just use something like, and I'm using ultramarine blue in this particular case. With gouache, it doesn't matter because you have access to the white paper, white paint. And that's pretty much the drawing done. And then I can just go straight on with the paint. So for the painting, what I do is I go from the darkest, I start with the darks, and then work from the lights backwards. So I can see the darkest darks are probably the rocks here, and the shadow sides of the escarpments, rocks, and the mountains. So my darkest darks, I can get a bit of ultramarine blue, a bit of burnt sienna. So just the tiniest bit of water so it mixes. So you can see how dark it can, and sometimes I add a tiny bit of magenta to this mixture to make it even darker. So let's have a look at this. It's quite thick, so that'll be my darkest darks. And what I do is just punch in a few darks, which are in this area. Very freely, make it a little bit warmer in some parts. And I keep that mixture there, and then what I do is I just get a little bit more ultramarine and mix a tiny bit of white and create another shade that's just marginally lighter than that mixture. Okay, and that can be in here. And it's slightly bluer. And we don't need to be precious about leaving the white paper, and then another even a bit cooler, tiny bit of magenta. Which will be the marks that are in here. Just the average color. There are a few darks. I'm seeing a few darks through here. So they're at different levels, and we have a few darks that are appearing through here and then into the mountains. So we need to go, I'll bring a bit of this color and mix a slightly lighter version of this. And again, just adding a bit of magenta. And these would be just a little bit lighter than that. So these are the darker sort of shadows, but they get lighter and cooler and grayer as they come into the distance. So that's about there. And then again, another layer, which is I'm just adding white to this and maybe a bit of cerulean blue. And again, a bit of magenta, maybe a tiny bit of yellow, cadmium yellow, or sorry, yellow ochre. And that can be, I think it needs to be even lighter. So this can be the mountain in the distance about here. And so that gives you a nice sort of level of darkest darks. It's gradually becoming lighter, grayer as things goes into the distance. Okay, so the next step is to get the lighter side. So if you look at the lights in the background, so let's look at so this will be the distant sort of mountains. Again, it's a little bit gray. It just had more white to it. And this will be the contrast between the light and the dark is not that great. They're much closer together in the distance. Just create this. We can always chisel this in later. I'm just putting the average value again. And then working from the background to the foreground. And then this needs to be darker slightly. So I add a tiny bit of yellow ochre to this. Tiny bit of, that's about right. And you don't want to go too early. You don't want to put cadmium yellow or anything like that because it's too chromatic at that distance. Okay.
Chan, this is Molly. Do you squeeze fresh paint into your palette every time, or do you have a way of keeping your paints soft and gooey?
Yeah, I use these palettes where I can close it and it's got a seal and it'll last me for a week without the paint going dry. And also I can use a bit of a spray to just keep it bit moist. But yeah, I usually like to use with fresh paint. So this will be probably last me a week and then I can keep, you know, squeezing fresh paint into these wells. Yeah, good
Great.
question. So I'll just add a bit more yellow ochre to my. So it's a little bit more chromatic. It's coming forward, especially in this area. So I'm just adding, but not going very, very dark, very, very bright as yet. You know, it's not, I'm not touching my cad yellows thing, but it's giving me a sort of level of depth with the lights as well. I can probably knock that up a bit as well. Introduce another layer in between. And I'm just still using the same brush that I've used before. And when I get to this area, I can just add a tiniest bit of cad yellow with yellow ochre. Because in here I see, because it's a flat plane, because the top part is slanted, the flat planes get a lot of the light on the edge. So we can just create that to create that depth. So we got that depth. The next set is going to be the lightest is going to be, I think, the ocean color and the rocks. So you can do really either way, but while I've got it, I might just use my colors here. Just clean this up and mix a nice ocean color, which it's got to be darker than the sky color, which I left at white paper yet. So I just use a bit of ultramarine blue, a bit of cerulean blue, and obviously that's way too dark. Add a bit of white and a bit of cobalt teal and a tiny bit of magenta with it. And if you look at the mountains, and you can just put it down and see how dark or light it needs to be. It's nearly there. I think I can just add a bit of yellow to this. And because it's a little bit too chromatic, I think that's probably okay. Can put that down. And that's just the deeper ocean. I'm leaving a few light edges on the edge. This could be my watercolor experience, but sometimes and getting this in and then just adding a bit more cobalt teal. It becomes a bit greenish. In this area as the water's coming forward. I'm seeing that, so get that down quickly. You don't need to worry too much. Don't try to go for too many changes in value too early. You can adjust them later, but get the bigger relationships in. And I'm sort of sensing a bit of this sort of color through here. And just varying that and adding a bit of blue. When I add water, it's hardly any water at all. I just don't like to use too much water with gouache. Its strength is opacity. So the key differences with the three mediums I see is for watercolor, its strength is its fast drying and its transparency. With oil, it's opaque and it is slow drying, and that's its strength. With gouache, I just find that it's opaque and it's fast drying. So you find the strength of the medium and you paint to the strength of the medium. I think it's a mistake to bring your watercolor knowledge and paint watercolor like gouache and gouache like watercolor. I have studied, my heroes are, you know, the Sargents, Edward Seagoes, who painted in both oil and watercolor. But if you really study them, you see that they actually paint to the strength of the medium, not just paint wishy-washy sort of paint. They knew what they were doing. So these are the flat plains, which are a little bit lighter in value, and it's got a bit of grey color. So let's get that in first. Probably a bit lighter than that. Bit of pink. And don't worry about the highlights and things like that this early. This is just blocking it in quickly.
Are you wiping your brush in between colors?
Yes, I'm washing my brush, and we can't see in a container here, and then using a tissue to wipe off the water. Yes, good question.
Thank you.
And this part is actually getting a lot of sunlight, and it's a flat plane and against the dark, so I'm just using a lot of more white in this area, okay? And that's already given that layer to sort of come forward. And it's the whites I have left actually is, maybe it's just my watercolor experience, it's already creating some crashing waves on the edge, but I will use gouache to create that. So the next bit is these areas. They're slightly warmer, so I'm adding a bit more yellow ochre to these. Rather than trying to paint every bit, I'm just being very impressionistic and just putting it down and bringing that forward. And I'm seeing a bit of blue on the rocks, and trying to paint individual rocks is not a good way to do it. It's just bring out a couple of rocks, a few darks in between, and suggest it. Then I must say that John and Daniel Smith, this is great that that we are doing these to keep people connected, and you know, especially gouache and watercolor. And I'm always advocating this, and what you're doing is fantastic. You know, generating interest globally. You know, we're a little bit isolated in Australia. We don't get to see many of the big events. So connecting it online is fantastic. We can be in touch with you guys out there. I have
Sean,
lots
I
of
just
friends.
wanted to read you what Buffy said. She's got us all
Yeah.
cracking up. She said, I need to do some office work today, but this is seriously making me want to paint with gouache instead. Hashtag Sean made me do it.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you,
lots
Buffy.
of good comments in both Facebook and the chat here on Zoom. Good job.
Oh, lovely. That's fantastic. Yes. All right. So we've got a sort of a blocking done already. And then what I would do now is to get into a little bit more detail, but then we can't leave the sky white. The reason is we want to bring the contrast between the mountains and the sky a bit closer. At the moment, it's too great. But we've already created depth and distance with color harmony. All right, so let me just wipe off a little bit of area here. I don't want green in the sky, so the other thing to mention is I actually, this is my first ever gouache painting that I have done indoor. I do all my gouache paintings outdoor, and I usually have it at an angle, like a straight, but this is for you to see the camera. I have it flat, so it's a new experience for me as well. So lots of white, a lot of white, tiny bit of water, a lot of white. I must say that the ultramarine blue of Daniel Smith is far superior to any brand that's out there. So I even use my, in my watercolors, the blues are fantastic. Okay, so just a tiny bit of pink in this, and maybe a tiny bit of yellow. Okay. And let's just try this. I think it needs to be even a little bit lighter. When you put this in, it brings the mountains closer together. And then you chisel in the mountains the way you want it. So I like to keep that one a bit high. And add more white. So thick paint, it's not dripping out of my brush. Okay. Make something a little bit interesting. Okay. Okay, we've done the hard work now. I think it's just getting the little bits. So I just clean the brush, wipe the excess water, as you can see, and now I'm ready to tackle a few little things in between. So I just clean the palette a little bit. And let's just have a look at a few more blues into the distance. So this is just marginally sort of. So what we have painted here is the shadow. Now the lighter sides would need to be put in. And it's got to be just very close to the value of the sky in the distance. Especially that sort of distance. Okay. And then I look at the other value that's there. It's got to be a bit darker. but just a little bit of yellow ochre. Yellow ochre, it's actually the three colors: cadmium, yellow ochre, obviously white, ultramarine blue, and magenta, and maybe burnt sienna is probably the three colors that I use the most. And probably I don't need much more color than that in most of these. Just adding a little bit of another level of darks in there. This
And
is
when
just
you go out
adding.
to plein air,
Yep.
when you go out to plein air, which 6 colors do you take?
So the 6 colors are ultramarine blue for my blues, my warm blue, cerulean blue, which is my cool blue, magenta, or I use sometimes alizarin crimson, and the cad red. And for the yellow, it'll be like raw sienna and burnt sienna. And the burnt sienna is more of a red than a yellow to me.
Thank you.
So there are a few darks that are coming through here. A few shadow planes that I'm just trying to define. Okay. Just adding a few little bits. And just define the contour of this hill a little bit. And obviously some dark accents within the shadow, especially here in this area where you get the least amount of light. Burnt sienna, it's the same combination. By limiting your palette, you actually are bringing unity and harmony into your painting. And the dark accents, the darks within the darks, and I think some of you may know this as ambient occlusion or occlusion shadow. A few more connections through here. And that's sort of creating a better depth of the subject. Let me get to this bit here now. With the rocks, all you have to do is just sort of look at where the light's coming from and having a few different angles. Variety is the key, adding variety, but finding unity. Yeah, to me, it just comes to two things. So too much of unity leads to boredom. Too much of variety leads to chaos. And it's just finding that right balance is what, to me, what paintings are all about. And these are sort of incidental sort of bits, but I can add a bit of sort of warmer accents here and there. So I just used the one brush for the whole demo so far, and I don't think I need to use another brush. One is enough. To So I think the question I get asked most is, do I use gouache in my watercolors? Yes, I do. I'm not against it, but I realize that the more I learn about watercolor, the less I use gouache in my paintings. And actually nowadays I hardly use any gouache at all. In the past I used to use more, but now I not that I want to eliminate it consciously. It's just a subconscious thing. I have developed enough brush skills to leave the whites where I want. Now it's just adding a bit of highlights on the waves and stuff. So just adding a little bit of blue into this, then white in the distant, just tiny bit of blue, because you don't want the white waves in the distance to be just little tiny touches, highlights. And you don't want too many in the distance. Maybe a little bit of a wave or two or something, and I'll just use this. And they become lighter. A few more. Just a little few lights through here.
We have a question on Facebook, and
Yeah.
they are curious to know, how long does it take to dry? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I just find probably within 3 to 4 minutes, gouache is dry enough to paint. I mean, it's not dry enough to frame a painting or anything, but it dries very quickly. So that's the advantage with gouache is that it is fast drying, and we just got to use it to our advantage. And I just put a crashing kind of wave through here that indicates a bit of action, and just add a bit of this and a little bit of this through here. And now it's sort of trying to eliminate and suggest a few waves. I think it's just way too many breaks if you add too many. So just be careful not to overdo these things. Let's have a look. I think I just need to just tone down a little bit of stuff through here. Bit of a shadowy sort of area coming through from the top. And the other thing is, when gouache dries, it actually retains its vibrancy. With oil, I think to some extent watercolor, it dries much lighter. So you got to scare yourself and go darker. The secret to watercolor is, if it looks right when you're painting, it's wrong, as you all know. But with gouache, it actually dries quite well with vibrancy. So I'm just adding a little bit of few accents of shapes just to break that area, and creating a bit of depth through there. So I think we're just nearly there. I just got to add let's just add a few more little dark. There are some breaks on the rocks and tiny bit of bits.
Chan, we have another
Yeah.
question on Facebook, and
Yes.
they're curious to know, what white do you use? Thank you.
Titanium white. I just find titanium white is more opaque, whereas like things like zinc white is more transparent. So for watercolor, if you're going to mix it with another wash or something, you can use zinc white, but I just use titanium white, which is much more opaque.
I see I missed another question, and they were
Yep.
asking, what is the cobalt teal? What teal do you use?
This is your cobalt teal blue that you get from Daniel Smith. It's called cobalt teal blue. And all I'm doing now is just adding a few more darks in this area. And a couple of more rocks, maybe. A few rocks. And we're nearly done. I just wanted to keep this more of a study. And keeping the edge broken creates an impression that it's, you know, it's a crashing wave of something. A few rocks. I think I just need to knock this back a little bit through here.
Chan, Rajat this side. It's a beautiful demo.
Oh, thank you, Rajat. That's really kind of you.
It's a beautiful demo.
Thank you very much. It's very, very nice of you to say that.
Chan, I learned so much watching this. It was just exactly what I needed to think that what my goal is a good goal.
Okay, great. So let's just take the tape off. I like taking the tape off, and it just gives you a nice feel of the subject. So it's a quick demo. It's not obviously a very involved thing, but hopefully you got to see how something was done very quickly. And yeah.
Bravo, gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's
Bravo.
beautiful. And I have a question. You
Yes.
said you small size because you paint out on location. Do you paint
Yes.
big sizes gouache?
Not really, because I use oil for my bigger studies, bigger pictures. I just find that I like to use gouache to capture something very in a small way, very quickly, because it's fast drying. And you know, and other thing I must mention is softening the edges. I can soften more edges with oil because it's slow, whereas it's very hard to soften edges with gouache because it's fast drying. And I don't really worry about the edges, but I use tone to do my tonal contrast. You know, that edge to that is very, very similar. So it's a tonal softening more than the physical softening of an edge, if that
So
makes
you have
sense.
to paint it. Yeah, if you paint it much faster than watercolor because it dries so fast.
Yeah, I generally find that I paint watercolors very fast too. For me, an hour and a half is the maximum I would spend in any watercolor. If my finish painting, it takes more than an hour and a half, there's something wrong in design or something I'm trying to address or fix. So I like the spontaneity and the quick energy of quick brush strokes, and I like to emulate that. You know, even in gouache, I like to paint it as quickly. Otherwise, you just labor on and you just lose that freshness very quickly. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. That's just my opinion about you. That's how
We have a follow-up question on Facebook.
Yeah, sure.
I hope I'm not interrupting anybody. I'm sorry.
No.
Judy is wanting to ask, her quote is, "Sure, he went through his palette colors, but he didn't mention the teal. He's included it for a reason. And I'm curious to hear because I love it as well." So she's curious to hear about the reason you included teal since it was not in the original
Okay,
palette.
that's a very, very good question, and I must thank you for that, because the reason is, as you can see in my palette, I don't have green. Yeah. So the reason is that if I have a tube of green, I tend to overuse it. And the reason is that I use the cobalt teal with a bit of yellow and a bit of red to mix some sort of green. There's actually greens here in the ocean water, but if I use a tube green, it just doesn't look quite as nice. So I use a green biased blue, which is why cobalt teal is included.
Awesome.
It's a good question.
Well, thank you very much. That was awesome to watch that. You were so quick while answering all questions. Was wonderful.
Thanks very much.
You're
Thanks
so
very
welcome.
much, John.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, there you are. I like how you put your image. That's a new one. I think we maybe ask artists to do that. We put the reference photo above. That was awesome that we saw that through the whole thing.
Yeah, so I do that by online classes so they can see everything at once, so they can see what I'm doing as well. So that's a good setup, yeah.
Well, it's neat because a number of times I saw going from your painting back up to the reference, then back to your painting. It was very nice to have that there. Very, very nice.
Oh, great. Thanks very much, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
It was great to
you.
see you all
Thank you,
today.
John.
Thank
you, John.
We're
Thank
full house
you.
today, John and
Thank you.
John.
Thank
You
you.
were all
everybody.
over.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very
Bye.
much. See you.
Wonderful
Bye.
weekend.
Thank you.